happens a lot when you try to just going into the inner world is that you get enmeshed with your mind. And so the idea is that there are two entities. There is you and there is your mind, which is something that if you try to reside in the role of the observer, it's somewhat easy to see. So it is easy to see that you kind of want something, your mind kind of wants to do something else. And the problem is that it's very easy to get enmeshed. It's very easy to get sort of like mixed up with that. So you and your mind are one. So what I'm talking about is about getting lost in thought. So the idea is that you have a thought, and instead of witnessing the thought, you think the thought. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. If you really try to do this, you will see that this is the issue. So the main issue is that you kind of like go into a train of thought or like get involved on something like that, and then you lose a sense of self. Like you lose what you were doing. You become the thought. And the issue is that when you start trying to do this, when you try trying to meditate and try to explore the inner world, this happens a lot. Like, you know, there is a thought, you think the thought, you followed it. It's almost as if you got hypnotized by it, right? And then you take the thought and you actively think the thought, and then you like continue on the thread. You know what I mean here? So to be fair, that is the natural state of most people pretty much all the time. So the reality is that the thing you are witnessing, that particular thing of getting with the thought, and then you stop observing and you are that, you start thinking that, this is actually how you live your life. Like for most people in this modern world, that is how we live. So we don't live in any mindful way. We are just in our head in some sense, either in our head thinking or sort of distracted by something. That is basically the standard way in which humanity is right now. But when you try to be mindful, then you observe, then you kind of realize that this is going on, because this is very hard to figure out when you're distracted with life. But when you're actually trying to just observe, that's when you realize, oh, this is really a thing. And whenever this happens, and the problem is that this happens a lot in the beginning, then you don't realize that this happened until you come out of it. When you begin, it can take a long time for you to realize. And, you know, this happened to me when I started meditating, that I would just try to meditate, and then for 20 minutes, I'll be just lost in thought. Is basically all that happens. So you can be 20, 30 minutes completely lost, completely away from that role of the observer. And then when you come back to your senses, you're thinking, where was I? Like, what was going on? You don't even know, what happened. And the problem is that when you realize that, then you get frustrated. And it really does feel as if you just wasted time, if nothing happened. And I basically felt that way. I felt like that, what am I doing here? So I'm going to start meditating. Let's say I put a timer for 20 minutes, sometimes even in a guided meditation. Actually, not sometimes. When I began, most of the time, also in a guided meditation. You start meditating and then get lost in thought. But in my case, it was lost in thought for the entire time of the meditation. Then the alarm sounds, or the person that's guiding the meditation says, oh, let's return now, and not be like, what just happened? I was nowhere. I at no point was I here. The entire time I was just, lost. And so that frustration that I felt, and I'm sure that you have felt, and most people when they start meditating, they feel that it's not just a feeling. In essence, you did just spend, the last 20 minutes daydreaming. That's basically what happened. You were not quite meditating in the sense that you were not truly present. You were daydreaming. And in my case, that I basically just quit several times. So several times I tried to meditate because I heard it was, good for me and so many advantages and so on. But I quit it several times because I'm thinking, meditation is just not for me. I just go there and just waste that time. And the reality is that this was actually true. Meditation was not for me. To be fair, meditation was for me. Open awareness was not for me. That was not the right technique for me at that time. Today, I can do open awareness, and I do open awareness a lot. There are reasons. This is actually quite an important technique. It's not even a technique, it's a sort of state, but it was not for a long time. So this was really something that was not for me at that particular moment. And in fact, I do know, many techniques that you can do to avoid that and to train your mind better. So these are very cool techniques that are going to train other aspects of your mind. So they're going to be just as useful in your exploration of the inner world. They're going to make it easier, and they're going to avoid that problem. So they're going to be way more hardcore in terms of engaging your mind, so that you're not so easily distracted. And we're going to talk about this, but today I want to talk about open awareness. I want to talk about just being with yourself and just trying this thing. And there are a few things that I want to say that I think are going to be helpful for those of you that are interested in this inner exploration. Because at the essence, when you are going to be exploring the inner world, at some point you're going to have to do this. At some point you will have to do some form of open awareness. You need to get there. And I think that there are some things that I learned that are going to be helpful at any stage. And, the first thing to say is that being lost in thought is actually fine. It's actually truly fine. It does not feel as if it's fine. It feels as a frustrating waste of time. But in the end, it really does not matter. I tell you, if you just let your mind choose the thoughts that you will think, and then you just think those thoughts, and then you come back sometime later, 20 minutes, 30 minutes later, and you're like, what just happened there? This is actually a fine thing to do. And it works out in the end. And the reason is because even if you get lost in thought and you gain no meditation skill, you actually end up gaining one of the most important skills that you can possibly gain, which is the knowledge of what your mind likes to do. And you see, if you ever want to get to a level where you can have divine guidance, so if you want to get to a level where you want to access the kinds of things some people talk about, that God told me this, or that, I have this angel that talks to me, or that I have an inner guru, or people say like, my guides told me, whenever you talk about one of the most interesting and, in my opinion, useful things that can happen in the path, which is when you manage to access that type of guidance, if you want any hope of accessing that, then you need to know your mind. You need to know what your mind is doing. Actually, you need to know it fairly well, because it is hard enough to do this if you know what your mind is doing. If you don't know what your mind, like the ways of your mind, if you don't know how your mind acts, there's pretty much no hope for you. And so the idea is here, how will you ever be able to separate what is your ego and what is something else if you don't know your ego? So if you don't know how your mind is actually, operating. And I'm not telling you to get rid of your ego. I mean, this is substantially harder to do, but just knowing how it operates is actually very possible. And sure, it's not possible. It's not that easy to know all the ways in which the ego operates. The ego is very sneaky, and the rabbit hole goes all the way down. And at the end of the day, I bet if you knew all the ways in which your ego operates, perhaps you'll be enlightened. I don't know. But I know that it is very possible to know enough that you can access certain things that are not easy to access otherwise, and that are very useful in a spiritual path. They're very useful for fundamentally getting rid of suffering in life. And so what I'm telling you to do is, when you get lost in thought, then at the end of the session, instead of saying meditation is not for me, and what I've terrible thing that just happened. This was a waste of time. Then think instead, what was I thinking about? The answer to that question is very important. And normally the answer will be something like, my mind was making me anxious. So you started to plan things and you started to think about what needed to be done. Or sometimes your mind is just very distracted, very scattered. It just jumps all around. It's like a television changing channels, something like that. Sometimes the mind gives you amazing insights. So it chooses precisely that moment when you wanted to just reside in the role of the observer to give you all the best ideas, all the most amazing things that you really want to follow. So very interesting things that you cannot resist. And sometimes the mind also might scare you. So does it bring up memories or intrusive thoughts that are very scary? So those are some of the patterns of what the mind would do. And it is very important to know those patterns. Now, today, I will not discuss what every one of these patterns mean. These patterns have explanations and they are reflective of certain things that you can work on and help yourself, let's just say. But so today I'm not going to talk about that. I just want to leave this out there that even if you waste all of your meditation time in thought, completely lost there, when you come out, if you make a mental note of what exactly is that your thoughts were lost on, that's very useful. And it's not a little useful. It is extremely useful for many reasons, and especially for later, for learning to differentiate what is your ego from what is divine inspiration and communication. And so the basic idea is that your mind has a style. It has a sort of signature. Don't get me wrong, it's easy to confuse the mind for something else. So this is one of the biggest things when you finally access something, is the constant doubt of, am I just like telling myself these things? Is this something that I just made up? Which to some extent is always true, but we'll discuss this at another moment. But let me tell you this is a very useful skill, one of the most amazing things to achieve. It is very hard, but it's pretty much hopeless if you don't know your mind. And to know your mind, you don't need to be perfect in meditation. You don't need to reside in the role of the observer so easily. You need to just know what it does. And that's actually easier. It's easier to do. Like, what does your mind like to do? Does it like to scare? Does it not? And then, hopefully as it goes on, you also can figure out what is the register of it. Because there is actually a way that the thoughts of your ego feel. There's actually a sense that you can catch. There is a sort of flow of the divine, right? So there's a flow of something, and then there is the mark of the ego. That tends to be, it's not as easy as that. So I'm making it sound as if it's always so clear, but it can be very clear because there is a tinge of effort. There's something there that I want to be able to codify at some point and tell you. But the point is, for yourself, the more you try to just be on this state, fail at it, technically, and then come back and say, hey, what was my mind doing? The more you notice the style of the mind, which is very useful, as I'm saying. So that's the motivation. But of course, even knowing this, even having that motivation, it's still hard, right? So the second thing I wanted to tell you is that, yeah, sure, watching your mind is very difficult, but there are some things I can say that perhaps may make it easier. So I'm here giving you some motivation to attempt this, even if it feels like a waste of time, but it'll still be easy even if you know this. And so there are some things that I can say that I hope are going to spare you some difficulty, because these are things I did not know back when I was failing at this, or back when I was thinking that meditation just wasn't for me. And these ideas that I will talk about are exactly behind the reason why today this is so easy and fun. Okay, so let me just give a quick check here, because I am now, used to I had some connectivity problems, and so I don't want to run into this problem without being knowing. Okay, so let me see here. Come back. All right. So what I want to do is kind of spare you some frustration. So I meditated a lot using other techniques before I could do open awareness. So fundamentally what I had to do, and it might just be the case for you, I just went away into other techniques, which we're going to discuss in this channel. And I sort of like educated my mind, trained my mind in a way that by the time I came back, the problem wasn't as serious. And these days, the problem is almost not serious at all. Like it hardly ever happens that I am lost in thought. Most of the time, the entire time of meditation, I am not lost in thought. I may be thinking because there is a line that I am pursuing of something, but then is a willful and focused thing, but it is not something that, I'm unaware, where was I, that kind of thing. And this happened in an indirect manner. So there were other techniques that helped me. And then by the time I came back to this, I discovered quite a lot that, guess what? This is easier now. And, and this is a fair way to do this. And I think you should, by all means, do the same. But one of the things I discovered when I was able to return is that there is a mindset that I had also achieved that made it all easier. Because there are days in which my mind is very scattered. So it's not so much that I might be lost in thought, but one thing that might happen, especially if I haven't been meditated for some time, the first days back, they're going to be with a lot of scatterness, a lot of a lot of that. So this still happens. And yet I have a different mindset than the one I used to have. And the reason why now I find this pleasurable, and I find open awareness pleasurable, even when it is a mess, even when this is happening, full no lack of control, I still find it pleasurable and fun. And the reason is because of a certain calmness, a certain calmness and good humor. And so what I want to talk to you about is about good humor related to this. Because you see, people tend to have an enmity with their mind. Like the mind is sort of like the enemy. And first of all, most of the time people have no idea what their mind is doing. Most people are going through life, their mind is commanding everything they do, and they just think they are their mind. They're completely intertwined. I think the word is they're identified with their mind, right? So you basically just doing everything your mind tells you, believing everything it says, believing your emotions are all real, believing all this stuff. And, most people don't even notice that there is even a separation. But then, sometimes someone tells you, observe your mind and have mindfulness. And then you try to do it, and then your mind hates it. So there is two entities. There is you, and then there is your mind. And the mind is your enemy, and you are the enemy of your mind. So the mind is pissed. It's pissed at you because of many reasons. And sometimes it's because it's bored. So it's bored and it's dopamine deprived. And so the mind wants something more entertaining. And then it will try to serve you options. It will distract you in some way or serve you something amazing so that it is just entertained. And then it's going to tell you, hey, look at this wonderful thing we need to think about. Think it. And, let us have some fun here. And so your mind is resisting being present and mindful with and one with all. And so the mind is really not helpful. So the fact is that your mind is not really your friend when it comes to this activity. And we'll talk a lot more about this today. But I want to call your attention to the fact that you're also not your mind's friend. Because this activity, the activity of trying to be mindful, it's basically an activity of opposition between you and your mind. You are the enemy of your mind as well. Because when you are told to watch the mind, you want to do this, and then your mind does not cooperate, what is the normal attitude that you have? I know because I had that. It is an attitude of severe judgment. I judge my mind harshly. I'll be like, oh, come on. Look at this. I mean, it's completely out of control. Like, look at it's just absurd. And, like I will have these frustrated, harsh thoughts about the quality of my mind. And I judged it to have very low quality, right? So I want to call your attention to the fact that, sure, your mind does not cooperate, and we'll discuss this, but you're also the enemy of it. You're also not, your reaction is not a friendly reaction. So you're like, look at my mind. It just will not stop. Look at what it brings up. It just makes me worry. And you get kind of mad. And that's not a friendly way to think about someone. And so what I'm asking you to do is to try to have a lighter attitude about all of this. Because one of the things I realized, and I hope you will too, is that when you watch your mind is actually kind of hilarious. Now, if you can bring this attitude of exploration and of realization of how ridiculous all of this is, and look at what my mind is concerned about. It's kind of hilarious, and it's don't get me wrong, it's not easy to realize that it's all hilarious, because your mind is usually giving you some serious stuff. And you think, oh, the things my mind just gave me to think about are very serious indeed, right? So you look at it and think, your mind, for example, is reminding you of a whole lot of things. And, those things are real. So things like, I needed to do this and I forgot. Oh my God, I'm procrastinating this thing I had to do. And this thing is important. And so you're like, oh, this is a serious thought that I thought. But if you think about it, your mind chose that moment that you decided to meditate to give you that thought. It's kind of funny. Just consider this for a second. You have carved the time to meditate, which means you said to yourself, oh, I have those 20 minutes. So you decided that in those 20 minutes, you would not do whatever it is that your mind is telling you to do. Whatever you're procrastinating on, you had decided that for those 20 minutes, you will continue procrastinating, because you're not going to do that. You will just meditate. And exactly at that time, your mind finds that it is the moment to remind you of this. Think about it for a second. Isn't that ridiculous? Like, isn't this kind of hilarious? Sure, the thing you're procrastinating on, it might be very serious. It's not as if you don't think about it other times. It's not as if it doesn't exist after you. It's not as if it's helpful. Like, how helpful is it to think about those things that you need to do afterwards anyway, right now? How is that helpful? It's not helpful. Why does it choose exactly that moment? Isn't that funny? Like, there is something about this that is kind of funny. This is what I want you to think, because the moment you realize how hilarious it is, it all gets easier, because the normal thought is either, oh, look at my mind, some angry thing, or identification, or like, oh my God, you worry. So you actually think those thoughts and you worry. So either you think those thoughts and worry, or you observe your mind and you're like, oh, look at that. In reality, it's more like, what are you doing? Like, what is this thing you're just attempting right now? Because it's inopportune, it's completely useless. Why are you doing this? I think it's funny. And this is kind of like what I wanted to think about. Because, your mind is sort of playing a game with you. And it's a very inopportune game. And so, sure, and the mind is not helpful. Let's talk about that. So many traditions have a lot of sort of animosity towards the mind. So, right? So they'll say things like the mind is the enemy, or the mind must be eliminated. Right? A lot of the Asian traditions, most of the Asian traditions, would say something like, that the mind must be eliminated. The mind is the source of all suffering, and precisely it's the ego that's the source of all suffering. But in any case, you probably get my meaning. And they're not wrong. They're not wrong. And indeed, it seems as if the mind is intent in thwarting every effort that you make towards inner growth, and it is doing this indeed. It really is a part of its job. We'll talk. So your mind is not engaged in your spiritual growth as you are, because the mind has a different objective. and we'll talk this in a second. I just want to conclude this thought, which is to say that, sure, the mind is not the enemy. The mind, they have this sort of vision of the mind as sort of the enemy. I want to kind of try to bring the idea of the mind as sort of an opponent that is kind of hilarious in a sense. Just bear with me and go with me on this, because I'm talking of things that are generally not codified, right? So the instruction ends at, pay attention to your mind, stay at it, good luck, it will work out. And it's true, it will work out, but good luck staying through, staying on it. And so let's think about, what is the role of the mind? So the role of the mind is to foster your survival in the physical world. Okay, let me repeat that. The role of your mind is to help you survive in the physical world. And so to be stable in a physical reality, you must be fed, you must be safe, you must be part of a community with a valuable standing so that you're, help to survive. So these are the kinds of things you need to survive in the real world. So when people talk about the mind, when they talk about the ego, they're concerned with things like, you develop certain patterns to help you survive. And to survive, you have, very basic things. Like, for example, you're sort of super attracted to sugar, right? Because that is one of the things that fosters survival, at least when we evolved. But also things that help you be better in a community. So things like, for example, things like greed, attachment, concern about what others think. So those kinds of things, which we take so negatively, but we have to understand, and at some point we'll discuss this here, they have functions. So it's not that these things exist for no reason. These things all help you maintain a certain standing in a group, which is very good for your survival. So these are all things that the mind has to do for you to survive, or at least had to do when we were evolving. But the mind is responsible for your survival in a much more fundamental level. And so let me think how to say this. So the mind's objective is to help you survive in the physical world. And so part of it is the things you think about. But there is a more fundamental level than just like physical survival in that sense. The mind exists to ground what is real and disavow what is the rest as non-real, and keep you stable within the reality the physical reality. I know what I just said is completely nuts. If you have not thought about it, hopefully you had, and then this is going to be clear. But my point is this. When people think about your survival in the physical world, then people think of physical things, right? So we think of food, shelter, security, and community. So you think of things that are actually in the physical world. But a huge part of your survival in the physical world is the stability of the physical world itself. Now, one thing that I discuss in the channel, and there is a video called that your mind makes reality, or what is real, or something like that. There's a video there that talks about that. I have talked about that in previous streams as well, which is the fact that your mind actually creates reality. And that is something that can be proven. This is actually a metaphysical sort of statement that can be shown to you. So in that one, I'll show that to you at some other point. So for now, just bear with me. Your mind is creating reality, and by creating reality means is literally telling you this is real, this is imagined, this is actual reality, this is not reality, this is in a different world. Constantly doing that. And so a big role of the mind is not just for you to survive within what you consider physical survival is also to have this unit that is you, that point of view, that consciousness unit, just put it that way, that is you, stable, stabilized as a unit. And that is kind of bizarre, what I'm saying, but it's actually a lot more grounded than you think. It just would require a lot to explain. So for now, just bear with me, because my point is a different one. We want to be focused on the ability to just observe the mind. But these are things that I can explain with a lot more precision. So these are not just things that this is woo, I'm telling you this. No, this actually can be shown rather precisely. Not necessarily proven, all of these statements, but quite precisely observed. But the fact is that the mind has a fundamental role, which is to define reality. And one of its roles is to stabilize you within a spectrum of reality you can withstand. And so part of stabilization, of course, is your survival. So because within this world, there are rules. And so there are some rules to this game, and you need to be stable within these rules. So within these rules, we are animals, and these animals need to be fed, and these animals need to be away from violence, and these animals are community animals. And so within all these rules of this game, you need to satisfy those rules so that the concept of survival in a physical sense remains stable. So the idea that I'm trying to bring to you, remember, have you ever watched The Matrix? So in the movie The Matrix, remember when they say at some point, if you die in the Matrix, you die in the real world as well? It's sort of like that. So the rules of this game, the unit that is you, cannot exist differentiated unless you believe you are alive. It's sort of like the sense of this. And so, yeah, the rules of the game of basic survival remain. But behind that, there is also the part of being stable in this reality is that reality is stable. Do you understand what I'm saying? So the mind preserves the world in which you interact. And so the more stable is the world, the more stable are the rules of engagement of this world. What is real and what is imagined, what can be done or what cannot be done, what can be changed or not changed, the more stable you are. And the moment you start playing with the nature of reality and trying to expand your realm of perception and trying to comprehend a new dimension and operate within a new expanded set of tools, and those things are not really in a sphere where you normally have access to, that's dangerous business. So the endeavor of messing around with the nature of reality, it's both a good idea and a bad idea. Because sure, it has the potential of freeing you from all suffering, which is what we're attempting here. But it also has the potential of destabilizing you completely. So this is the kind of thing that happens, for example, when people have like Kundalini awakening. So have you heard of this, right? Some people have a awakening that is way too fast for them. They are not prepared. They're doing things that are the rush sort of knowledge that you're not prepared for, and they become completely unstable. They will stop sleeping. They have pain. They cannot control their body. So there's things like that, and that do happen, crazy amounts of pain. And so that's, by the way, it's an interesting thing to talk about. So you hear about this, a schizophrenic person. So what is schizophrenia? Schizophrenia is a fundamental inability to define the real world. So the world in which everybody else belongs to is not your real world. That person thinks that things that at least we are not seeing are real. What about people that go into a psychedelic trip and get very messed up? So that happens, right? So people go on a psychedelic trip and some people don't react well. They come back very, very scared, very traumatized, having seen things they do not want to see, or having been, in a fundamental sense, confronted with all of it. And people don't really think about this, but, all of it is all that is bad as well. So this is, again, one of the things that we need to discuss, which is that the confronting of unity, that, some people go and say, take a psychedelic trip, and then they say, I was one with the world and it was wonderful. And then another person says it was a world of horror. Well, they were both witnessing the same thing, because the essence of all is all. And that includes everything that is bad. It's just, what is the register that you bring? What is there's something in you that concentrates on a certain way of witnessing this. It's, again, deep stuff to discuss later. But you understand what I'm saying is there are ways to destabilize your reality. And that it's, in a sense, just as dangerous or more dangerous than even your physical survival. To destabilize your mind and your notion of reality, your tethering to this world, is something very dangerous, very, very dangerous. And your mind has just as much a role in keeping you alive in the sense that we're normally accustomed to, so in a physical sense, as it has a role in keeping you alive as a unit of consciousness that has some form of stability. When you destabilize this is a dangerous thing. That is the part of, this fundamental part of what your mind is supposed to do. So when you go around, when you poke around the corners of reality, mind's not going to be cool about this. So, have you watched the Truman Show, the movie, The Truman Show? So it's as if there's a moment that I think they cause a trauma on Truman to not go on a boat, so to not sail, because if he sails, then he might actually just reach the corners of that fake world in which he lives. And so they don't want him reaching the corners of that world. And so in the Truman Show is a very good allegory. By the way, so is the Matrix movie for, this spiritual path. But it's as if we're trying to poke at the corners of the scenario, like in the world where Truman lives. And the director, which represents the mind, it's trying everything possible to not let him do that, because he doesn't want to destroy the world. See, if Truman reaches the end of these places and discovers what is going on there, then the world is destroyed. So all of it is destroyed. So in a sense, the mind is the enemy, because it's truly trying to, it's really not your friend in the spiritual path, because the moment you let me resolve this. It is your friend when you stay within certain very safe confines. So if something is very stable, very established, slow, rhythmic in a sense, right? Accompanied by others, socially safe, then your mind actually is cool with that. This is, by the way, why religion is useful. Because the pursuit of spiritual growth from within the framing of a religion has a lot of that safety built in. And so the mind is a lot calmer. So these are paths that are, generally speaking, much more stable than to just go willy-nilly, take psychedelics nonstop, or just even do what we are doing here in a less responsible way, or in a, there's some risk to doing these things on your own, or without proper guidance. This is, the classic insistence that the Eastern traditions have, that you have to have a guru, you have to have guidance, and so on, because there are certain risks that come with this. And when you are within a religion, then your mind kind of calms down. This is, by the way, why, for example, the Bhakti path, which is the path of devotion, which is the idea of having the devotion to a God, believing in something more powerful than you, and having that devotion is also helpful, because there is something quite stabilizing on this. Again, things to discuss later. These are complex topics, but there is a reason for these things. It is much easier to follow a path if you believe in God, and believe in a God. And there is a sense in which it is easy to believe, and a sense in which it is hard. And all of this can be discussed, because there is a sense, at least from what I understand, in which gods exist, and a sense in which they do not. So all of this is complicated. But if you are in a normal religion, you say you're a Christian, or you're a Jew or something, and you believe in a God that is a very specific God in certain ways and within the confines of our religion, there's something very stabilizing there. So your mind is going to be okay with that. You know, it's even going to be friendly to it. But the moment you start poking, so the moment this starts getting dangerous, gets too loose, your mind's not going to be okay with this. Okay? So, sure, it's not your friend in that sense. But it doesn't have to be your enemy. Because the role of the mind is the role of the mind. So, the more you understand the nature of the mind, the more you see that you cannot help it. It's basically definitional. The mind is that which has this role. That is what it is, precisely the ego, right? So the ego is that which has this particular function. It is what it's supposed to do. It just cannot help it. If it wouldn't do it, it wouldn't be a mind. So what's the point of being angry at it? It's like being angry at a dog because it's a dog. It's what it is. Once you truly see what is happening, once you understand, this thing is doing this, is trying to keep me stable, is playing this game against me because it is fundamentally afraid of instability. It's kind of funny. It's actually kind of hilarious. So if the mind if there is something on this earth that would behave like this, then that is the mind. It is almost by definition. So why would you be angry at it? So let me go to the dog example. Have you ever tried to train a dog? So if you try to train a dog, does it help to be angry at it? Does it help to be like, dude, I want to learn? It's not going to help. I mean, you can be angry at the dog. It's not going to help. It might actually make things harder. What's the point of this? It's a dog. It cannot be anything more than a dog. You have to train it within the confines of what the ways to train a dog is. And what you have to have is substantial patience. So you have to have patience and insistence. You have to have a bigger will than the dog, right? So the idea is that the dog can be very insistent. Some dogs are very hard-headed, but every dog has a limit. And every single human has the potential to outweigh a dog. Every human, if they has the ability to have a will that is stronger than a dog. Now, not every human has a will that is stronger than a dog, but every human could if they set your mind to it. And so it is within your power to wait out any dog, basically insist longer than the dog. It's not different with your mind. It's harder, but there is a way in which you can just wait it out. So if you just let your mind do its thing, and you want to think? Yeah, sure. What do you want to do? Oh, you want to be scattered? By all means. We have all the time in the world. Imagine you had that attitude, right? Just do it. Just go. By all means, think whatever you want to think. At some point, the mind just would say yes. We'll finally, okay, fine, I'm done, because I see that you're going to win. So practically what I'm telling you to do, if you possibly could, is to have an attitude of curiosity about, what the mind is doing, and also some perspective about how fun it is, what it is doing. If you just look at the mind and be like, okay, just do your thing. Then it's just a matter of time. Basically, the mind just will leave you alone. It truly is just a matter of time. In my experience, sure, I mean, the first times one does it, I don't know how long a mind could resist, because the first times I tried to do it, I failed at seeing the end of this. And by the time I came back, I wouldn't say I was a beginner anymore. But, these days, it will last, it depends, it can last a while, but it's still within the confines of an hour, and what's an hour? And, it's never really more than that these days. And to be fair, if I've been meditating a while, it might be no time at all. But, when you're coming back, I mean, you're being really out, or like when you have real concerns in this world and things like that, then it can, last a little longer. It's not that long. You just wait it and it's like, yeah, cool. Now, of course, as a beginner, it could be a lot longer, which is why I recognize the importance of other things as well. And not only that, there are reasons for the other techniques that go beyond this. but the point is this, like it's just like you can just there is a way, there is a point of waiting that there is a point that if you wait long enough, you win. And that's true even of a beginner. The problem is that with a beginner, it might just be longer. And so that might be kind of extra hard. But at the end of the day, it's kind of hilarious. And if you have this attitude of like, this is kind of funny, it is also sort of entertaining in a sense. So, so if the mind says that, let's say, you need to order something, then you should try to, you can notice, okay, fine, yeah, I need to order that thing. But also kind of try to look at it like as a, oh, okay, so you're trying to distract me with the order, and that's useful. But then there's a second degree of this, which is to say, oh, look at you trying to get me away from that little corner. Because behind that thought, there is kind of space to explore, and it's kind of like distracting you, hiding. Again, it's as if, so I'm talking here as if we're trying to train our mind like a dog, but the mind trains you as a dog. So basically, like when people are trying to train a dog and they're trying to distract it, people do that with children as well. So something like, instead of saying no, what they do is they'll distract you. Oh, here's a little toy. Oh, no, don't go there. Like, come here, look. And then they call them, treat. When they do this sort of like redirection, that's your mind redirecting you. And when you realize, you're like, look at you redirecting me. Look at you. So you see, that's like a meta. It's more meta. So the 1 degree is basic, which is to say, oh, you like to give me worry. So that's a good degree. But there's a next degree, and hopefully at some point you'll be able to do it as it's happening, in which you're like, oh, look at you like doing a distraction thing. And it's funny because all of the methods which you would scare a child away from, like try to get a child away from something, or let's say the dog is biting furniture, or your cat, right, scratching the sofa. Then all of the ways in which we attempt to stop that are the ways your mind does it. So it will do it with distraction. It will do it with some enticing thing. It will do it by fighting. Like that will be the equivalent of giving you like scary thoughts. It will do the same thing. And when you start realizing, oh, look at you screaming at me, it's kind of funny. Imagine a child that was screaming at you, like trying to tell you, no, you stay here. You do this. As an adult, what would you do? Wouldn't you laugh? Wouldn't it be kind of funny? Like, what are you trying to tell me to do, man? You're 5 years old. Wouldn't you think that? It's kind of like what it is, really. You start looking at it like, what are you trying to do here? You're kind of hilarious. That's kind of what I want to, to see. Like, look at the tricks. And also, if you manage to have a little bit of love for it, because there is quite a lot that is lovable about it. How it's trying so hard to keep you within something that fundamentally we consider to be positive, which is surviving and being stable. Isn't this something that you would think positive? Look how hard it is trying. Sure, it's causing you trouble in the wake, right? It's causing you suffering. But at the essence, isn't this kind of like, it's trying something. It's trying something for you in a way. So if you can muster a little bit of love and you see for what it is, it's kind of ridiculous. and there is an exception, though. I have to say that there is an exception, which is that, and all of us will face that exception at some point, but some people face it substantially harder than others, which is that when the mind scares you. And I'm talking about trauma. So sometimes what your mind throws at you is very scary. So that would be the equivalent of somebody going to the dog and like beating the dog. You see, that's no longer funny. You see, I can, so it's the same thing, let's look at the opposite way. So we were thinking, okay, what if a 5-year-old is screaming at you to do something and you're like, that's funny, you're 5 years old. But what if the 5-year-old then hits you, or the 5-year-old comes and bites you, like does something really unacceptable? See what I mean? So there is a level that's no longer funny. And the level that's no longer funny is when you go into the realm of trauma. Because once the mind exhausts the simple strategies, it will bring the big guns, and the big guns are often related to your deepest fears. And so when it does that, then that's a different thing. So we need to talk about what how one faces that and what goes on, because everybody's going to face that at some point. What I can say about this right now is that, yeah, that's not really funny. That needs to be addressed. That is not something that you should wait out. You can, let me tell you this, it is technically possible to wait it out, meaning it is a fair technique of trauma treatment to just remain on it. But tell me about something that has a risk of destabilization. So yes, it will work. Like in an Eastern tradition of like Zen, for example, they will just tell you to stay at it. But then again, you might be in a monastery surrounded by other people. It's a different, you're already a monk. So it's a different thing. To face it as a normal individual like that, I don't think it's a wise thing, because there are much better things to do, which is to just go and treat that. Because there are techniques to treat trauma that are going to be way more effective, way faster than just like waiting it out and observing it simply, because that can be very hard and again, very destabilizing. So I'd say that if you face that, so if this happens, and it's, if it happens once, whatever, but if it keeps happening, if you see that that's a pattern, that's what your mind does a lot, then right now, for now, as we're talking, then you just stop and go do something that is less open. So probably really you should not try open awareness right now. Go do some journaling and realize that you do have some trauma that has to be treated. That's basically, go the path of trauma treatment. That will be my recommendation there. But one thing to say is that for most people, that's not going to be the first thing you encounter. Even people who have trauma, it is not normal for this to be the first thing. You can have severe trauma and still like be on the realm of distraction, anxiety, worry, and interesting thoughts for like a year before it starts resurfacing stuff. It's very common for that to happen. So the chances are this is not a risk at first. It eventually will be, because eventually you have enough space that your mind is like, oh no, And by the way, part of it might be your mind saying, oh no, come out of there. And part of it be your mind saying, now it's time that perhaps now you're ready to face this. Because, in some sense, the mind wants your stability, and curing your traumas is in a sense also stabilizing. So there's like pros and cons to these things. It's complex. What is your mind trying to do there? But the fact is that is the exception. When the mind is trying to scare you, and I don't mean scare you with a worry. I mean scary as in bring up intrusive thoughts that are distressing, or bring up memories that are distressing. When it's doing that, that's where I'm like, oh, that's not funny. That's not funny. That's a different thing. You see what I mean? But overall, that's not what you're going to encounter. I had very severe trauma, which is something I discovered through meditation. I'll tell you eventually, in detail what this is. But it was a long time before I faced anything. And in fact, I don't think, the mind would try to scare you, but it will. It doesn't give you things that easily. Those things that easy. So for most of us, it's not going to be a thing that we're going to be facing that quickly. So overall, having that attitude of friendliness and being like, what is that, you child? It's actually useful. It helped me a lot. It's what helps me now. To be fair, I don't even need to remind myself. It's just now the attitude, and that is fun. It's kind of cool. It's like, oh, look at you. This is hilarious. Let's just watch this movie. Kind of like watching a kid doing its thing. It's like, it's kind of funny. You're watching it. It's like, yeah, it's cool. So you stay that long enough, and then it calms down. And then, okay, now we'll do what I proposed that we did. Almost like you tire now the child, and you're like, okay, are you good enough? Okay, so now let's sit here and, I don't know, cut your nails or something, whatever it is that you wanted to do. So, all right. And by the way, if you are running though into this problem of trauma, right? So if you're like really running into those scary thoughts and so on, then do write to me in the comments or on Discord, because then I'll know that, there's somebody here that's listening to me that's actually facing this, and this will make me, put it as a higher priority or a more urgent thing to discuss. So, bearing this serious instance, most of the time your mind is very funny, and I just hope you noticed it. And yeah, I hope this was helpful.